Alright, so in Quixel Mixer here, we just need to go ahead and create a new project, which I've already done and named it Mark 6 Gen 3 here. And then just inside of that project folder, we just need to make a new mix. I've already got my own, but I'll make a new one to show you guys how I made my setup. So we're just going to change this to a custom model, and we can bring across our FBX that we exported from Blender. And you'll see at the moment all the normals look terrible, and that's because we don't have any normals loaded on apart from the mesh normals. So we'll just go ahead, we'll edit our texture sets, and I'm just going to bring this off to the side just so you can see it as it happens. So we'll import our normal map. So we've got normal EXR here, and you'll see once that's loaded in, it looks all nice and crisp now. And then we can just do the same for our AO and our material ID maps. Cool. So we'll go ahead and we're going to make two groups here. We're going to make one, we'll just call this like Chief Armor. And we'll make another group, we'll call this one Visor. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead, we'll make a solid, we'll make two solids actually. We'll put these in each folder, and we'll just call this one Chief Green, and we'll call this one Visor. So for the Chief Green, we'll just define some very simple values just so we've got some color on all of this, and I've already got predefined values that I want to use for everything. So we're going to go with 52583B for this. I found it's a rather nice color, and you'll see nothing has taken effect because we've got this visor up here, and we'll just get a nice orangey gold for this. So we'll just go to albedo and we'll get a nice color for this. So we'll go with D18E29. Oops, 8E29. And what we'll do, just because at the moment it doesn't look quite right, we'll just crank up the metalness all the way to white, and our roughness value here, we're just going to go with 3333 or 20 on the value there. Now everything's still gold, so we need to actually define where the visor exists and where the painted green goes. So we're going to add an ID mask. If you just press 8 on the keypad, you can see what colors on our ID mask correspond to where. So we'll go bright blue for the visor, and we'll add the ID mask here, and I'm pretty sure the bright red was for that. So there we go. Now we've got something that kind of begins to resemble the way the Chief looks. And just while we're on the base color here, we also need to define some basic principles for the, we can leave the metalness as is, as this is a painted material, so it needs to be dielectric, but we'll just change our roughness here to 3A, 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 or 23. Actually, that's probably a little bit, we'll go 25, or is that too rough? No, we're going to stick with 23, I think. I think that works out nicely. Cool. And then we just want to do the same thing for the other areas that we've masked out in our ID. So if we just go Control D to duplicate this, we'll just call this black, and we'll change our ID mask on this to the green areas. So just make sure you take off the bright red. And we'll change our albedo here to be 3D3, A38. Gives us a nice dark color. And we'll change our roughness just so that there's a little bit of visual difference between these things. Once again, we'll just leave the metalness as is. And then we also have two more areas. So we've got the steel, which was all the little screws and the highlights that we had. So we'll change those to be our bright yellow. And these bits we actually do want to have a metalness value to them, so we can make the metalness value white there. And then our hex color here, we'll go E0E 4E4. So it gives us like a nice whitish blue sort of color. And then our roughness, roughness here, we'll just do the 3A. One again, 23. I'll just change this. It's only like 2 values of difference. Just go 25, just so it's a little bit different from the base roughness of our chief green. And then we'll duplicate this one more time, and we'll just call this glass and emission. And I've screwed up something on my material IDs, so I'm just going to select the bright cyan for this. You should have one more than I do, as we also defined the interior lights behind the glass. Mine have gone missing, but I'll fix that up later. And just for this, we just want to make these pure white as such, and the roughness and all that can stay. Yeah, it can stay as is for this. That's right. But and also this doesn't need to be a metal material, so we'll just turn that off. So that will be fine as is, as we'll adjust the way that the glass and the emission materials look once we actually set up the materials within Blender. Cool, so now this all looks very flat. There's no visual interest to any of this. We've got the colors defined, but now we start to need to grunge everything up and give this a little bit more personality. So we'll add another solid layer in here, and we're just gonna go variant base is what I'm gonna call this. And we'll go and define a new hex color of 26, 26, 26, like so. And we're just going to set this one to subtract, and then our metalness is going to be the same. It's just going to remain black. Our roughness here, change this to 191919, or just 10 on the value there, and we're going to change this to add. So you'll notice at the moment this has only changed values across the entire thing, and it hasn't done any individualistic changes or, you know, sort of scattered changes. So we'll fix that. What we're going to do is we're going to add a mask stack here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in a texture map, and we're going to use a library asset from what Quixel offers us. I'm just going to filter this to be imperfections, and I'm going to search for a dirty metal texture. So I know it's this one here. So there might be a bit of mismatch between the textures you choose throughout this and the ones that I'm picking here, and it becomes more apparent with some of the scratched metals and the grunges, as they have duplicate instances of names across these. It doesn't really matter all too much. Some of them will give you very different changes for the values I'm going to show you, but the beauty of texture work is that you can make it unique and make it yours. So you can try to follow along one-to-one with everything I do and replicate exactly the textures that I pick out for all this, but it's not the end of the world if you don't find the exact same ones that I do. You can always just adjust some of the values and amend it to get your own unique results. I'm just showing you the texturing process that I went through exactly for my previous project, so I'm just trying to recreate that. So we're going to bring this in, we'll leave it as a gloss map, and we're just going to ramp up our slide here to somewhere around 0.4. Probably on the higher end of 0.4, closer to 0.5, somewhere around there. And just to make it easier to see the edits that we're making to the mask, if you just press 9, you'll notice that we can see exactly what's being affected on the mask. And this is actually probably a bit much. I probably want a little bit more variation shining through, so I might just take that down a little bit more. Cool. And then we can go ahead, we can add a projection modifier to this. And I'm just going to alt-click on it just so it's only affecting the one below it. It's probably not necessary to do it for something like this. It's just a force of habit that I've gotten into when it comes to adding in projection modifiers. And so we'll change this to box projection. We'll turn our height influence off, and we'll turn our radius off as well, and we'll bring our scale to 0.5, and then I just want to see, how does the tilt look? I think I'll just leave the tilt where it's at, so that's okay. Cool. And then this is fairly uniform, so we just want to break it up with another texture here. So we'll just go texture map, another library asset, and this time I'm going to be looking for a grunge map. And so this is where we'll start to form some discrepancies between what you have and what I have, most likely. Just as you can see, there are several textures that are all called grunge, but I know that this is the one here that I want. Some of these, if you don't see anything that matches, don't panic. If you do want to try to match it, in the online search here, you have all of the surface imperfections online. So if I search for a grunge texture here, you'd see we start to get many different versions. And so I've gone downloaded some of these from the online. But so if you are trying to match everything one-to-one and you can't see it in your local library, you can search for it here and try to match it up. So I'm going to go with this grunge map here. And with this one, oops, I did that completely wrong, sorry. That meant to be for this. That looks better. And so we're going to change this to a roughness. Just inverts it pretty much. And we'll just bring up the range a bit just to clamp in the brighter values that we have going on through here. Change our blend mode to max. And now you can see that we have some of the previous texture shining through here, so it's just a little bit more variation. And then we'll come in, grab another projection modifier. This one you have to alt click on it so that it's only affecting the grunge map, otherwise it will also affect the projection here and this texture and throw everything out of whack. And so we'll just crank this up to a value of 2. So now if we come back here, you can see very subtle, but it's just started to add in some variation to the color as well as the roughness here. And I'm just flicking through these channels using the keys at the top of my keyboard. So 1 is for the rendered view, 2 gives you the albedo, 3 is metalness, 4 roughness, 5 gives you the normal, 6 displacement apparently, 7 is your ambient occlusion, 8 your ID, and 9 is your layer mask. I'll throw those up on screen just so you can see them, but you'll probably see me just mash through it as I don't have these memorized either. Cool. Okay, so we've got that, and so that gives us our variance base. And so we'll go and make a variance dark. And we'll do the same setup. Oops, before we do the masking, we'll set up our base colors and everything. So 565, 941. Cool. And so this is just a lighter version of the base color that we have here. I'm going to set this to overlay and it's going to darken everything. Once again, we don't need any metalness on this material. Our roughness is going to be 47, 47, 47. Or 28 on the value there, and we're going to set this one to add. So now we can start to build out our mask stack here, and so I go get a texture map, library asset, and I'm going to go for a scratched metal, and I believe it's further down. This one here is the one that I want to be using. I think there's a handful, maybe there's only one. There's a lot of scratched painted metals, but I'm looking for scratched metal, just for reference there. We'll keep that as a gloss, and we'll just leave that as is, actually. We'll go ahead, we're going to add a gradient remap to this. I'm just going to flick this back to the layer view just so you can see what's going on. And we're just going to bring the range down here, and as you'll see, this is just going to make some of the highlights in the map pop a little bit more. And then on top of all this, we just want a projection modifier, just so that we can scatter more of this across the model, make it less uniform. So first and foremost, just holding shift here, just to make it snap to 15-degree increments. I'm just going to put the angle there down to -90. And I just want to have a look at the tilt. I might leave the tilt to where it's at. I'm going to turn the height influence off, and I'm going to push the radius up the whole way, or maybe I'll go 0.5 instead. Yeah, I think 0.5 just looks a little bit nicer around the edges there. And I'm going to bring the scale down to 0.6 just to scatter it across the model a little bit more. And so you can see we're starting to get much more variation across the roughness and our albedo channel as well. And we'll just top this off with a little bit more variation here, so we can just collapse these. And we're going to go ahead and we'll bring in a noise. We can just set it to simplex. And this one, once again, just flick over to this so you can see what's happening. This one, whoops, we want to change to overlay. And then, so we'll go with a seed of 71. Our amplitude can be 0.6 with a frequency of, let's go with 11. I think we want 8 or 6, 8 octaves. How do you pronounce this? I should have practiced the pronunciation of that more for the tutorial. The lucanarity, I've never understood what that says. And 0.75 here. And so if we just toggle this on and off, you can see the variation that that's adding in. So we'll just put it on. So there we go. Cool. It's starting to come to life a little bit more. It's a little bit less bland, but we've still got a ways to go. Alright, so we'll add in another one, and we'll call this variance color. If I can spell, that is. And you'll never guess what the variance color is going to do. Alright, so we'll change the color here to 202.616. And so this is just a darker variation for the color. We'll change our roughness value here to 686868. No, whoops, D8. Sorry, my bad. There we go, or 85 on your value there. And we'll change our blend mode to overlay. Just at the bottom there. So that gives a really nice pop straight away there. But that's probably more because of the overlay factor that we're using, and it's sort of just cutting back through everything else. Alright, so this is a fairly simple mask that we're going to make. It's just to add a bit of variation of colour across the model. Whether it's realistic or not, I don't know. It's just something I've done just to add some more variation to the colour, just so that not everything is so uniform across the entirety of the model. But if you know a better way of doing this, then by all means go with your method. I'm just showing you mine. So we will use a seed of 33 here, amplitude of 6.8. I've got a frequency of 6 on this one. Octaves, we'll go with 6, a bit more breakup. These values for this noise mask, I'll tell you in advance, aren't that important, as we're actually going to use a blur modifier or a Gaussian blur modifier on top of all this at the end, so it's actually going to sort of dissolve a lot of the detail that we're actually going to get from this. So it's not all too important to follow along exactly with this. It's just, once again, I'm just going along with the previous setup that I had. And so we'll go 2.7 for the thing that I don't know how to pronounce properly, and we'll do a persistence of 1. So this looks terrible, but it's okay. We're going to fix everything up, so we'll grab a projection here. And this looks terrible for a few reasons, just to explain what's happening here. One, because it's, even though it's a noise scatter, right, it's still very uniform across the entirety of the mesh. Mind you, down here it's probably a little bit more broken up. So, but we're just going to use a projection modifier just to help with some of the breakup across the length of the model. So I think we'll go radius of 1 actually, just so it's not so harsh along some of the edges there, and we'll bring the scale to 0.3, and we'll just adjust the angle here. I'm not going to hold shift on this one, I just want a little bit more freeform with it. I'm just going to bring it around to -75, and whoops, 0.3 not 0.2, and I think we want to adjust tilt, maybe? No. Okay, we'll go with that. So this is still, yeah, this is still relatively uniform across everything, but it's it just breaks up a little bit more, or maybe a little bit less, depending on how you want to look at it. But yeah, it's just changed the projection more than anything, and the scaling of it. But as I said, it's not all too important, because then we'll throw a Gaussian blur on top of this. Set this to 0.3. And so what you see is that this is rather intense at the moment. We're going to fix this, but it just starts to add some color variation across all parts of the model here. And so to make this more subtle, as it stands out a lot at the moment, we're just going to take the opacity of this entire layer and make it half. So it's still probably a little bit noticeable, but as we start to blend in more and more of these variance layers and add more into it, it will just bleed into the overall look of everything. Cool, so we'll make a new solid layer here, and this one we will call variance roughness. And we'll do the same setup as always. So we'll set up our albedo color, so 6C7053. So also just using more variations of our green color, and this one's just going to be 6 versions of E. So that's lighten that up. And by memory, I don't think this is an overly complex mask setup that we do. I think this is quite literally just add just a smidge of variation into everything else that we're doing. So we'll use a library asset, and we're looking for a grunge map here. So this is where things will get a bit tricky in knowing what grunges are what. I'm going to go with this one here. What I'm looking for is I'm looking for something that's got decent contrast between the white and black values, but nothing that's too intense. I'm kind of looking for sort of wipes and stuff like this. I think this might be the one that I've used before. It's hard even to tell off of my cheat sheet that you can't see. Alright, let's try to see if we can get this to match. Got 0.5 here. I don't know if this one's quite right, but we'll go along with it, and if I need to change it, I'll change it afterwards, and I'll show you. And so we'll get a projection, once again, just so we don't have so much of it in one place. And we'll set our radius value to 1. And let's bring our angle to around 30 somewhere. Yep. I just want to see what the tilt looks like on this one. I'll leave that as is because we got a nice patch at the back there, but that will undoubtedly change because we'll adjust our scale to be 0.4. There we go. That adds a nice bit of variation on everything. I think I'll leave the tilt as is. Cool. Alright, so yeah, that's more or less what I was going for here. I'm just thinking that we might need to invert this. Just want to try a different grunge map very quickly. Let's just have a look. So I think that's the one I'm using now. You know what, that's close enough. I might just cramp up the range a bit here. So yeah, this still isn't the one that I used. I'm actually just going to take the radius off. I might just do 0.5 for the radius, actually. So yeah, that's not exactly what I had. But it's okay. The idea is that it's just adding a little bit of variation across the model here. Might actually be a little bit too much, so I might actually just crank that up a little bit more, since this isn't quite the same one that I used the first time, so it doesn't look so obscure. Let's do that. Cool. Now, there is a bit of a problem with this, in the fact that this is sort of adding some of the green onto the black parts of the model here. That crow at the front of my window is really annoying. So we'll just add in an ID mask here and we'll just put it to the bright red, just so we take off the green elements that we're getting on the black parts there. Cool, so that's a fairly simple one. Just coming back to this, I realized I don't actually want to clamp this up as much as I did. I actually want to keep a lot of this variation here, so I might go to around 0.56. What I want to do is I want to change the opacity of these things. I completely forgot. So we'll change this to 0.2. So you'll see that heavily subdues the effect that it's having here, so it looks less like somebody's taken to the helmet with sandpaper now. So you've just got very subtle color variation, and same with the roughness. It's a little bit much for my liking. It's just too harsh. So we'll just make the contrast 0.75. Just subdue it a little bit. I was going to say I thought something looked a little bit. So we'll just go add in a new mask here. Add in this roughness. I really hope this crow goes away because it's annoying. Alright. Trying to ignore the noise. We'll set up our albedo here. So 27, 27, 27. And our roughness for this one is going to be set to pure black. But yeah, so this is just going to start to add in some darker areas to the rest of the roughness map, as well as some darker areas to our roughness, so that there's greater contrast in both. It'll make more sense once we do it. I won't try to explain it. So we'll add in our mask stack here, and we'll go ahead and grab a texture map, library asset, and we're going to be looking for some scratched metal here. I think we've already used this one before. Not that one. This one here. Cool, so we've got our scratched metal loaded in, and we're just going to bring up the range here a bit to about 0.4. So I'm just going to press 9 so that I can see the layers that we're working on. And we'll bring in some dirty metal as well. So library asset, dirty metal. I think once again there's only one of these. Yep, so we've got this one here. We're going to set this blend type to add. So you can see that pulling through now. And we're just going to bring this down to 0.6, give or take. And we're just going to change this to a mask. Like so. So this is a lot scattered around the model at the moment. I'm actually just going to bring this down a little bit. And I might just make this a little bit more precise. I don't think it's going to make much of a difference, but. And then we'll just bring in a projection. We're going to have this affect both of these. We'll take our scale to 0.5, and we'll take the radius up, and we'll take the height influence the whole way down. And I'm missing something here because I don't quite have the look that I want. Figure this out in just a second. I might change the tilt. I think that looks a little bit better. Yeah, so that's working nicely. We're getting a bit more variation and everything. I'm just not the biggest fan of how the scratches are working here, so I might go ahead and feel like I'm missing something on this that I'm not quite aware of. Put the tilt back. Okay, I might leave the tilt as it was. Yeah, okay. So that starts to... Oops, no, I want to see the roughness. So yeah, that adds in a little bit of roughness variation. I might just adjust. I'll adjust some of these just to have it pull through just a little bit more than what it already is. I don't want it to be too much. That actually might have been too much. Yeah, we'll just go around there. It's still close to 0.4, which is what I think. What I started out with. All right, cool. So we've pretty much defined all the base layers now for this material. So it's pretty well built out to the way that it's going to look. I'm just on our variance dark here. I'm just thinking ahead. We don't really want it to be affecting these steel areas, as it doesn't look great. And as we start to build up more materials on the steel bits, it starts to look very wrong. So just to nip it in the butt while we're here, we're just going to change this variance dark to only affect the painted green and the black materials. There's still some roughness that's affecting this. I think it might be the variance color or something in here. That's alright. But yeah, that's not too bad. But yeah, otherwise, I just remember from doing it my first time, it does start to look very, very strange later on. So we'll just make sure that the variance dark isn't affecting any of the steel pieces. Now, this will start to, these next few layers where the whole thing really starts to come to life a lot more, is adding in some micro scratching detail to the surface. So this will also affect the surface normals, or our normal map is probably a better way to say it. So there'll be a little bit of depth in these. It's also going to add in a little bit of metalness to our map. So there's going to be some variation in the materials that we're getting in the one texture. And then we'll start to stack on some edge wear and some paint chipping, some scratching around the edges just to scuff them up a little bit more, and then we'll finish it off with a dirt pass. And then we can address the visor so that it's not so silky smooth and clean, unlike the rest of the visor. Helmet, sorry. Alright, so we'll call this our micro scratches layer. And we want this to affect the underlying mesh. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and change our height value here, something that we haven't actually done before yet. So we want to set this to -1. And we're just going to set the wrap to underlying to 0.99. So it's like very, very subtle what we're doing here. And we're also just going to change the opacity of all this to 0.75. Oops, 0.75. So I know that's all preemptive, you can't actually see why I've done any of these things, but it's just going to, it'll save some headache in seeing some of the textures start to deform the surface of everything. And even this is already, this will already start to deform the surface a bit, very, very subtly though. I think if you change this more, yeah, you can see the effect that that's having on the normal maps now. So I'll set that to 0.99. Alright, so what we want to do is always, we're going to go ahead and we'll define our materials here. So 4C, 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 like that. And we're going to set this to add, because we want this to be rather harsh and sort of cut through everything else, as you'd expect. You know, scratches that have gone down past the paint layer into the raw metal of the helmet to do. And so we're going to actually set metalness for this, and our blend mode will still be normal, and we're just going to have our roughness be completely black, which makes this thing just way too shiny, but it's okay for the it works for how small these are. If they were larger, or if you want to make them larger, you probably need to adjust the roughness value in accordance to that, but I like these to be very micro surface level details, so having the complete black on the textures, with the amount of like pixels that they take up, it doesn't come through as a 100% black. Jesus, on the actual texture. So it just adds a nice little bit of gloss to the metal parts. So we can start to build out our mask for this one, and you wouldn't believe it, but we're going to use some scratched metal for this, and we want something that's fairly aggressive. And I honestly, this one I cannot reference what I've used previously because all the names are the same, and the detail's too small in what I'm reading off of to actually tell if I picked the right one. So I'm just going to go with this scratched metal surface. They pretty well all look similar to this, so you're not going to go too wrong here. And I'm just going to clamp up these values here just to bring out predominantly the scratches. So I don't really want any variance in between. I'm thinking I might just try a different one, assuming I picked a different one. Nah, I might just go with the one I chose. I kind of don't mind this one because I feel like this has got a little bit more variation in the length, and some of them are like a bit squiggled and all that. I'll go with this one just because it's a little bit more varied in the way that it's working. Cool, so we'll add in a projection, we'll set it to box project, and we'll bring down the scale to something like 0.2 because we want a lot of these scratches appearing all across our mesh. And as you can see, like it's not 100% black just because of the amount of pixels that can actually be rendered by it. And so for our radius, bring it up to 1, and we'll take our height influence off so we're not getting the vertical scratches across everything. And so this looks rather nice. We might have to adjust it because this isn't the exact same one that I've used previously, but that's alright. And so this is very uniform, right? Across the whole mesh we've got just all of these scratches across it, and I know that I'm using the wrong one. I've just realized because this is all white and we only want the scratches to be white, and I don't think we do any inversions on this. Oh no, we do. We need to invert this. That helps. Okay, there we go. So yeah, now you can see we're just starting to get these little highlights just across the model here, which just look nice, but it's too uniform. Like even though it's a subtle detail, it still appears way too uniformly across the mesh, and all the scratches they're all the same height. They all do the same amount of damage to everything. So even though it's subtle, and yeah, you could leave it like this, I'm just going to show you how we're going to break it up a little bit more and add some more variance to how deep the cuts are in some areas and make them less and more so in other areas. So, simple option is we're just going to go ahead and we'll add in a noise texture. This one we're going to set to multiply, because that will allow us to define where the scratches are pulling through. So now you can see, without modifying the noise texture, we've got a dark zone there, whereas if we put it back on, you see it brings more of them back in. And so we'll set our amplitude to 2.7, we'll have a frequency of 11, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to alt-click on the eye of the noise, just so I'm only previewing that layer. You'll see it's gone and automatically hidden the other ones. Just so you can see what I'm looking at, like a -4. How many octaves? 5. The linearity, I've still got no idea. That one there. I need to do a tutorial in how to pronounce that word. 0.48 for our persistence, and that just breaks things up nicely for us. Cool, so if we just alt and click on this again, so you see now it's broken things up a little bit for us, right? So it's not as persistent around the model, and I'm actually thinking I might I'll just try a different scratched metal. Okay, maybe the one I had is fine. I think that's the one I was using. Yeah, that's fine. It's meant to be subtle. That's what we're getting. So yeah, you can adjust your values if you want. I'm personally going to leave it as is because I think it gets the effect across quite nicely. Just making sure that did this apply? Yeah. Just making sure that was the right color. Yeah, if you wanted to make this more prevalent, I mean, you know, going up the albedo so that you can see it more clearly, but I think it's alright with where it's at. And just to show you in the normal map here, I might even make this 0.95 instead. So yeah, you can see in our normal map that these are pulling through. Now, I'm going to change it back because 0.95 is way too intense there. But yeah, I can see that there is just a little bit of divoting on the normal map there. You can't really see it on the normal map, but I can see it. I can see it here. Anyway, enough rambling. So with scratches, you're not going to get scratches in the crevices here, right? So I can see some there. And it's not a big deal that they are there, but we can remove them, and it's a fairly easy process to do, so we might as well. And it's good practice for some of the other edgeware pieces that we do, as well as say stuff like dirt, which we'll get to. So we're going to use a custom map here. We'll go select image, and we're going to use our AO that we've baked out. And this is handy because we can use our ambient occlusion to mask out the crevices or any areas in black that shouldn't have any scratching. Because, you know, you imagine back here, even though you're not going to see it, just on the principle of the fact you shouldn't get a whole lot of scratches under there. It should be pretty neat. And if the logic applies there, then you know that it's going to apply elsewhere on our model as well. So we'll change this to multiply, because that way then only the areas that are in white will show through. And so that will do a pretty decent job. I think I can still just see a little bit in there. So what we'll do is we'll just clamp this up from this end. So we'll just tighten this up nicely. And once again, I'll just show you what that's done. So it's really just filled in some of the darker areas. Don't really know what's going on there. That might have been something I did weirdly on the UVs, but anyway. So I'll do that, and that's all gone shiny again because it's only showing the AO. But yeah, so now we shouldn't have any scratches on the interior there, so you can see some of these just popped back in, specifically one right there, but now they're gone. So some tricks that the AO maps can do for you. So I've just decided to end this first part here, as this whole thing ended up taking 2 hours, and I did it all in one sitting, and I didn't realise. So I've cut the first part here, and we continue in the second part, and we do all of the edgeware and put all the finishing touches to the textures, and then export it so that we can use it in Blender. So I've just split it up just so that you can take a break, and everything else will be finished off in the next episode.